Hey, who's that good-looking guy? Rebecca asked, causing her husband, Michael, and their friend Patricia to look at her in surprise before they'd even stepped through the backyard gate. Following Rebecca's gaze, Patricia saw one of Nathaniel's friends, Rebecca's brother-in-law, sitting by the grill. Just a reminder. I'm right here, Michael replied, trying to keep things light. What can I say? I appreciate a nice-looking man when I see one. Rebecca shot back with a playful smirk. Michael's response had a touch of irritation. If you're going to check someone out, maybe keep it to yourself next time. Turning away from her, he focused on greeting their hosts. Hi, Barb, sorry about that. Patricia and her husband, Leonard, were hosting a backyard birthday party for their daughter, who had just turned 13. Patricia noticed them approaching but chose to brush off Rebecca's comment for now. No big deal, you're both welcome. Come on in, she replied, still holding the gate open for them. Where should these go? Michael asked, holding up a case of beer. There are some coolers by the tree with ice, Michael. A couple are for the kids' drinks, but the rest are for the beer. Just put it in any empty one. And the gifts go on that table over there, she pointed, guiding Rebecca, who was holding a wrapped box. As they moved in, Leonard, the co-host, came over to greet them. Hey, you two. Good to see you, he said, giving Rebecca a quick peck on the cheek. Mickelbo, let me take that for you, he offered, reaching for the case. But Rebecca wasn't done. Hey, Leonard, who's that handsome guy over there with your brother? She asked, looking over at Nathaniel's friend. Not realizing what had already happened, Leonard glanced over in the direction she indicated. Oh, that's Charles something. He works with Nathaniel in construction. Do you know him? No, but I wouldn't mind, Rebecca replied, grinning. He's a real catch. Leonard glanced at Michael, noticing a strange look on his face, and tried to ease the tension with a joke. Look out, Michael. Sounds like Rebecca's on the prowl, he laughed. Michael forced a smile, surprised by Rebecca's antics, but didn't want to make a scene. Looks like she's ready to trade me in for a newer model. Guess that'll be the day, he joked. Patricia, picking up on the mood, gave Michael a light-hearted pat on the arm. Come on inside, Leonard said, and then turned to Patricia. Why don't you help Rebecca with the gifts? Catching a look from her husband, Patricia knew what he meant. He was hoping she'd ask Rebecca about her strange behavior. She kept her voice low as she and Rebecca headed to the gift table. Okay, Rebecca, what's going on? Did you and Michael have a fight or something? What? I don't know what you're talking about, Rebecca replied. Oh, please. We've all known each other for ages, and I've never seen you act like this around Michael. Something's definitely up. I'm just giving him a taste of his own medicine, that's all. He's out all the time, flirting with every pretty girl he sees. You know Sarah Thompson? Patricia nodded. Yes, what about her? She saw Michael at a restaurant a few days ago. Apparently, he didn't notice her there, but she saw him chatting and laughing with the waitress, and even saw the waitress give him a little kiss. They looked like they were flirting the whole time. Rebecca, Michael's a naturally outgoing guy. That's just his personality. A kiss is more than friendly, Barb. That's crossing a line, and you know it. Leonard kissed you on the cheek a minute ago, Patricia pointed out. That's different. We're close friends. But this is some random waitress he's cozying up to when he's out. I don't like it, and it doesn't pass the wife test. The wife test? Yeah, like guys have a husband test. You shouldn't do anything in public or private that you wouldn't do in front of your spouse. Well, what's good for the goose, I guess. But really? You picked my daughter's birthday party to make your point. Relax. I'm not going to cause a scene. I just want Michael to think twice about his behavior. Fine. But can you do me a favor and avoid starting any arguments today?
Promise, no fights.
Besides, look at that guy, he's built like a tank. Michael would be crazy to cross him. Patricia saw more guests arriving. All right, I have to go play hostess. Just remember, no fights.
No fights, Barb.
I swear. Rebecca looked over and saw Emily, the birthday girl, chatting with her friends. She decided to go over and say hello. Michael had just finished helping Leonard with the drinks and was heading in the same direction. They both reached Emily at the same time. "Congrats, Emily. You're officially a teenager now," Rebecca said with a grin. "Guess you can start giving your parents a run for their money." Michael chimed in. "Same goes for me, Jen. Well, the congratulations part, maybe not the rest," he joked. Emily laughed, leaning in to give Rebecca a hug and Michael a quick peck on the cheek. "Thanks," she replied, introducing them to her friends, Jasmine, Megan, and Angela. After a bit of small talk, Rebecca seemed eager to put her plan into motion. "All right, birthday girl," she said to Emily. "I'll leave you to your friends. I'm off to say hello to your uncle." Michael started to follow her but noticed Leonard signaling to him from by the coolers. As Rebecca walked away, Michael called after her, "Be on your best behavior." She threw him a mischievous look and made her way toward Nathaniel and Charles. Meanwhile, Michael approached Leonard. "Hey, what's up?" Leonard gave him a warning look. "Just a heads up, Patricia had a chat with Rebecca, and it looks like she's ticked off about something. Apparently, she thinks you were flirting with a waitress somewhere, and she's got this plan to make you jealous. I think that's where all this hunk talk is coming from." Michael looked confused. "What? I haven't flirted with anyone as far as I know. Did she say who supposedly saw me?" Leonard shrugged. "Not sure, but I think she's planning to use Charles to get under your skin, so just keep your cool." As Michael and Leonard talked, Rebecca had reached her target.
Nathaniel.
"Rebecca, how's everything?" Nathaniel replied. "All right, I guess," Rebecca answered. "By the way, who's your handsome friend here?" Nathaniel was caught off guard, but his friend responded quickly, standing up and extending a hand. "Hi, I'm Charles," he said with a charming grin. "I'm guessing you meant me? Who else would I be talking about?" Rebecca shot back with a wink. Nathaniel glanced around, a little bewildered. "Hey, Rebecca, where's Michael?" She waved it off. "He's over there chatting with your brother. I'd love one of those," she added, pointing to the beer in Charles's hand. Nathaniel nodded. "Why don't you grab her one, Nathaniel? And while you're at it, leave us to get acquainted." Without wanting to seem impolite, Nathaniel agreed. The moment he headed to the coolers, Charles seized the chance to take Nathaniel's now empty seat and offered it to Rebecca. As she sat down, she noticed her husband staring at her with a hard glare. Instead of unsettling her, his reaction only boosted her confidence, confirming that her plan was hitting its mark. She promptly turned to strike up a conversation with her new acquaintance. Meanwhile, as Nathaniel reached the coolers, he joined Leonard and Michael. "What's up with Rebecca? What happened?" Michael asked, curious. "She's getting cozy with Charles over there." "Who is this guy anyway?" Michael asked. "He works with me on that big high-rise project downtown. I've known him about 6 months. He seems all right, but he's got a bit of a reputation as a ladies' man. I wouldn't really trust him around women." "He didn't bring a date?" Michael continued. "Nah, it was kind of a last-minute thing. He was supposed to play golf today, but after we got off work late last night, he got a text that his game was canceled. He started grumbling about having nothing to do today, so I invited him along to the party." Michael could see now what his wife was up to, although he wasn't entirely sure how to address it. He knew Rebecca too well. Once she latched onto an idea, she wouldn't drop it until she made her point. Ignoring her could push her further, but confronting her risked riling up Charles. Michael wanted to avoid that possibility at all costs. "Nathaniel, do me a favor, will you? Keep an eye on things for me. Let me know if it starts getting out of hand." Nathaniel nodded at Michael's request, grabbing a cold beer from the cooler before making his way back to where Charles and Rebecca were deep in conversation. Handing Rebecca her drink, Nathaniel pulled up another chair, thinking it was the right time to step in, hoping Charles might take the hint. He commented on some photos he'd seen that Michael took of the lumberyard fire, praising Michael's skills and asking if he planned to enter the press photography contest again this year. Though slightly annoyed by the interruption, Rebecca politely replied that she assumed Michael would be participating. Then, turning to Charles, she explained that her husband worked as a photographer for the Tribune and had won several awards at a state competition for press photographers the year before. Charles nodded with faint disdain, acknowledging Michael across the room. Rebecca confirmed it was him, her response carrying a dismissive tone that didn't escape either Charles or Nathaniel. Charles steered the conversation in a new direction, mentioning his love for working with his hands and building things that last. He then looked to Nathaniel for confirmation, and Nathaniel offered a nod of agreement. Seemingly satisfied that he'd effectively shut down the talk about her husband, Rebecca resumed chatting with Charles, leaving Nathaniel out of the loop. Nathaniel felt like he'd made things worse. He'd heard Charles use that line about working with his hands on women at bars before, and it always seemed to work on them. Now, Nathaniel realized he might have just given Charles a golden opportunity. Feeling more like he was making things worse than helping, Nathaniel excused himself to wish his niece a happy birthday, again. Michael continued mingling, keeping an eye on Rebecca and her companion. None of the men seemed to bring up Rebecca's interactions with another guy, but the women started talking. Michael overheard Rachel gossiping with her friends, pointing out that the man Rebecca was with worked as a photographer. She added that her dad once mentioned how photographers often find themselves in risky situations because of their job. Rachel seemed surprised that Michael hadn't gone over to confront the man. Michael chuckled to himself. It wasn't really Charles's fault after all. It was Rebecca's, and though he sometimes felt frustrated, he would never get physical with her or any woman. Glancing over, he noticed an empty beer bottle next to Rebecca's chair, along with another in her hand. Rebecca tended to drink more when she felt uneasy, which wasn't a good sign. Charles, on the other hand, had 3 empty bottles by his chair. Just then, Leonard called out from the grill, mentioning that everyone was starting to get hungry. Caught up in watching Rebecca, Michael hadn't even noticed the smell of grilled meat wafting through the air. Leonard announced the food options: burgers, brats, chicken patties, and pointed to a nearby table stacked with sides for everyone to help themselves. Michael figured this could be a chance to separate Charles from his wife. Maybe they could grab a quiet spot to eat, and he could figure out more about this new friend Rebecca had. But as he turned to approach them, he saw the 2 lovebirds setting their beers down and standing up together. Apparently, Charles had decided Rebecca was his company for the day and casually took her by the elbow. "Not happening," Michael muttered to himself as he strode over. "Excuse me, could you take your hand off my wife?" Charles instantly let go of Rebecca's arm and raised both hands in a show of peace. "My bad," he half laughed. "We were just going to grab some food." "Yeah, well, I can take it from here, thanks," Michael replied, his tone sharp. He grasped Rebecca's other elbow, guiding her over to the food table. "What's gotten into you?" Rebecca demanded, frowning. That was really rude. Ignoring her complaint, Michael ushered her to the front of the food line. "Get some food," he said in a flat tone. "You and I need to have a talk by the shed while we eat." Meanwhile, seeing Michael and Charles's tense exchange, Nathaniel decided this was his chance to speak to his colleague. Now alone with him for the first time in a while, he asked, "What's going on here, Charles?" Charles just shrugged. "Hey, I'm married to one of my brother's best friends." "Well, then leave her alone," Nathaniel shot back. "Man, you should be telling her to back off. She's the one coming on to me. I'm just being polite." "Polite? Give me a break." "Look, Charles, drop it. If you think she's interested in you, you're wrong. She's just using you to get back at Michael over some incident with a waitress. You don't want to be part of this." Charles crossed his arms, undeterred. "Listen, married or not, I don't turn down a beautiful woman. I know women, Nathaniel, and I think you're wrong. She's genuinely into me. I can tell. Well, it's time for you to go. This is my niece's birthday, and I don't want trouble." All right, I'll back off," Charles relented, holding up his hands. "If she comes over again, I'll send her right back to Michael." "You better. Otherwise, you're out of here, Charles. I mean it. Scout's honor," Nathaniel said, giving him a quick Boy Scout salute. "Fine. Can I go get some food now?" "Yeah, go ahead." Rebecca didn't seem especially bothered by Michael stepping in. She'd only known Charles a few hours, and he was already acting possessive. Familiar territory for her, given the suggestive comments he'd been making all afternoon. Still, she got a thrill from seeing how easily she could manipulate him. But Michael's grip on her arm told her she had pushed her husband about as far as she should. She'd promised her friend Patricia that there wouldn't be any drama, and Michael had just shown he wasn't intimidated by Charles. She decided to stick by her husband for the rest of the day, hoping he'd learned his lesson. They filled their plates with food, and Michael gestured toward the shed, away from the crowd. Finding a quiet spot, he handed Rebecca his plate. "Hold this for a second while I grab a couple of chairs. I'll be right back." Even with his anger simmering, Michael kept his gentlemanly manner, holding the chair as Rebecca sat down. Then he pulled up a seat close by so they could talk privately. After a few bites, Michael couldn't hold back any longer. Known for being straightforward, he dove in, asking Rebecca about the rumor that he'd been flirting with a waitress and making it clear he didn't appreciate these kinds of games. Rebecca replied that she didn't know all the details, but had heard it supposedly happened sometime the week before. Michael rolled his eyes, making a sarcastic comment about how vague that sounded. Rebecca then suggested Michael might know better than she did, asking him outright if he flirted with every waitress he met. Caught off guard, Michael interrupted, asking if she'd heard he'd kissed them. Rebecca confirmed, and Michael stated there could only be two explanations. Either there was some kind of mix-up or someone was outright lying to her. He reminded her he hadn't kissed anyone besides her since they started dating. Rebecca looked him in the eye, usually her way of reading him. She felt she could gauge his honesty that way, and as far as she knew, he'd never lied to her before. "Why would anyone say they saw you kissing a waitress if it didn't happen?" "Beats me," he replied with a shrug, taking a bite of his burger. "Since she's your friend, maybe you should ask her. How do you know it's a woman? Better be a woman. If one of your guy friends claimed to have seen me with a waitress, there's your answer right there." For a brief moment, Rebecca wondered if Michael might have actually seen her friend at the restaurant and decided to kiss the waitress anyway. Consequences be damned. She still wasn't clear about what he meant by his last statement. "What are you implying about it being a man?" "I'm just saying, if it's a guy, he's probably got a thing for you and is trying to make trouble between us. Hoping to be the supportive friend and get close to you." "That's ridiculous." "Is it? Think it over. Was it a man?"
No.
"Well, then we're back to square one. I guess you need to ask your friend why she'd mislead you like that." They both fell silent, eating their food in uneasy quiet. When they finished, Michael had a final word for her. "This is Rachel's birthday, and I won't let it get ruined by drama over your friend. So if you keep cozying up to Charles, I'll leave you here, and you can figure out your way home. Or go home with Mr. Muscles, but you won't have a home to come back to." "Got it." Rebecca was taken aback by his intensity. "Michael, relax. I'm not going anywhere with Charles. That was never my intention. I just wanted you to know how it feels to have your spouse flirt with someone else. That's it. All right, you've made your point. Let's drop it here." He got up, took her paper plate and empty beer bottle, and went to toss them in the trash. As he turned around, he was relieved to see Rebecca standing right next to him. Charles, however, was less than pleased. He'd been stealing glances at them from his seat, nursing his disappointment as he ate his chicken patty alone. He still believed Rebecca was interested. He could tell she wanted excitement. He'd hoped to steal a moment alone with her, maybe slip away to a secluded spot, but with so many eyes on them, that plan was out. He'd have to put his desires on hold, at least for now. Despite the tension between them, Michael and Rebecca were set on making the most of the party. She stayed close to him for the rest of the afternoon, occasionally drifting off to chat with friends but always returning to his side. The only other time Rebecca interacted with Charles was when everyone gathered to sing Happy Birthday around Rachel's cake. Charles took advantage of the crowded moment to sidle up beside her and discreetly place his hand on her lower back while everyone sang. At first, she thought it was Michael, but a quick look showed Charles grinning smugly. Shocked by his boldness, she quickly scanned the room to make sure no one was watching. Thankfully, everyone was focused on Rachel. Normally, she would have slapped him right then, but she knew it would only cause a scene, and that was the last thing she wanted. Besides, she had to admit she'd given him a bit too much encouragement. If she got the chance, she would apologize to him and make it clear she wasn't interested. As he pulled his hand back and joined in clapping, the birthday girl effortlessly blew out her candles. Michael glanced over when he heard Charles's voice nearby, but he didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. Rebecca certainly had no intention of telling Michael about Charles's behavior during Happy Birthday. Naturally, Charles took her silence as approval. He knew how to handle this situation. She had to stay close to her husband to avoid suspicion, but he was sure she'd eventually have to step away to use the restroom inside. His plan was to catch her alone so they could arrange a meeting. He kept a subtle eye out for anyone who might have noticed his earlier move. For now, the coast seemed clear, and they both relaxed, each putting on their best behavior to avoid raising any alarms, except perhaps for Michael, who stayed slightly guarded. Michael, however, had seen guys like Charles before, men who thought they were irresistible and didn't give up easily. To be on the safe side, he decided he'd keep an eye on this potential troublemaker. The party picked up momentum after dinner, with Leonard cranking up the outdoor speakers for some background music on Pandora as games got underway. They set up a dartboard on the big oak tree by the shed, and Rachel's friends helped arrange the beanbag toss. Some of the women gathered around card tables for bingo. Rachel and her friends even challenged her parents, Michael and Rebecca, to a best-of-3 game of beanbag toss. Leonard warned them about Rachel's skill. Although the adults claimed victory in the first game, the next 2 went to the younger crowd. After the game, Rebecca gave Michael a quick kiss on the cheek, letting him know she was going to use the restroom and would be back soon. Michael said he might challenge Nathaniel to a round of darts. Rebecca stopped briefly to chat with friends on her way to the house and was lucky to find the downstairs restroom free, so she slipped inside. Nathaniel noticed Charles heading out and mumbled something, catching Michael's attention. Michael paused his throw, asking Nathaniel what he'd said. Nathaniel explained that it looked like Charles was leaving without saying goodbye or thanking them for the invite. Michael turned just in time to see Charles heading out through the gate and suggested that Charles might be upset because Rebecca wasn't giving him attention and likely expected to make plans with her. Nathaniel agreed, noting that Charles had a way with women and recounting a few times he'd seen Charles leave bars with attractive women. Michael turned back to the dartboard, but a thought struck him mid-aim. How would someone slip into the house unseen? They'd go out through the gate, loop around to the front, and enter from there. Handing the darts to Nathaniel, Michael said he'd be right back and headed for the back door. Rebecca had finished in the restroom and was freshening up her makeup. When she opened the door, she was stunned to see Charles standing there. Before she could react, he grabbed her shoulders, pinned her against the door frame, and locked lips with her in one swift motion. Had Michael been there a moment sooner, he would have seen his wife shoving Charles away with all her strength. But in that split second, she hesitated, disoriented. That was when Michael walked in. He seized Charles by the shoulder, yanking him back from Rebecca, and drove a hard punch into Charles's solar plexus, sending him stumbling backward into the restroom, where he fell to one knee, gasping for air. Rebecca, still reeling from the rush of events, felt dazed. It had all happened so quickly. She turned around, but Michael was already gone. Panicking, she frantically searched for him, calling his name, but he was nowhere in sight. Then she heard the sound of a car. She hurried to the front door just in time to see their car backing out and driving away, realizing the impression Michael must have gotten, especially considering her past interactions with Charles. Ignoring Charles, who was still struggling to catch his breath, she darted out the back door. The first person she saw was Nathaniel, still waiting for Michael's return, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. "Nathaniel, you have to drive me home now," she pleaded, her voice shaking with panic. Nathaniel, confused, looked at her, trying to understand. "Rebecca, what's going on? Where's Michael?" "He left. He saw Charles kiss me." "Is he hurt?" "No, Charles is still inside. I don't know if he's okay or not. Michael hit him hard." Nathaniel smirked. "Michael hit Charles?" Yes. Please, Nathaniel, I need to get home to explain. He was so angry, and I'm scared he's planning to leave me." Calm down, Rebecca. I doubt he's that mad. You didn't see his face. Look, Rebecca. I got here early, and I'm sure my car is blocked in. Let me at least tell Leonard we're leaving. After notifying Leonard, Nathaniel returned, confirming they were indeed blocked in. You'll have to call a cab, Rebecca, but you can borrow my car if you want. Really? Thank you. Relieved, Rebecca jumped into Nathaniel's car, desperate to reach Michael before it was too late. She squeezed out of the tight parking space with barely an inch to spare, carefully navigating past the other cars and onto the front lawn. The entire ride home, Rebecca sat in silence, her mind replaying the furious look on Michael's face. She had never seen him react that way. As they approached her house, fear set in about what she might find. Finally, they turned into the driveway, and she saw Michael's car parked out front. Nathaniel offered to accompany her inside, but she hesitated for a moment before gently declining. I appreciate it, really, she said, but I think I should handle this on my own. It's my responsibility. With that, she stepped out of the car, signaling to Nathaniel that she was fine. As she climbed the porch steps, anxiety tightened around her, each step amplifying her dread. Once inside the house, she braced herself for whatever awaited her. Michael was nowhere in sight, and a pang of worry struck her. What if he was upstairs packing his bags? Just as she contemplated ascending the stairs to confront him, the sound of the coffee grinder whirred to life in the kitchen. A flicker of hope sparked within her. Maybe he was just making coffee. Perhaps it wouldn't be as bad as she feared. Michael stood silently in the kitchen doorway, watching her before breaking the tense silence. So, did your lover bring you home? He asked coolly. Rebecca felt a rush of defensiveness. Michael, Charles is not my lover. The last time I saw him, he was still on the bathroom floor, gasping for air. Michael nodded but remained silent, which only deepened her unease. She had anticipated some reaction, whether anger or embarrassment, but his silence felt like a gaping void, pushing her to take charge of the conversation. Look, he caught me off guard, she explained, her voice steadier than she felt. I wasn't engaging with him willingly. He pushed his way in the moment I opened the door and kissed me. I didn't see you pushing him away, Michael countered, his tone sharp. You jumped in before I had the chance. Rebecca shot back. I was completely stunned. It took a moment for it to sink in, and by the time I realized what was happening, you had already hit him. As they spoke, Rebecca grappled with the eerie calm in Michael's demeanor. Was he genuinely composed, or was this the quiet before the storm? He remained fixated on his tasks, and she almost wished he would unleash his anger. His apparent indifference only heightened her anxiety. Well, she prompted, hoping for a spark of emotion. Well, what? He replied, pressing the start button on the coffee maker, his back still turned to her. Michael, I've never seen you so angry before. I honestly thought you would be packing your bags when I got home. Don't push me, he growled, his voice rising slightly. You're damn right I'm angry. What you did was immature and completely disrespectful. The only reason I'm not even more upset is that most people at the party were already aware of your antics. But do you know what really infuriates me? It's the fact that you chose to trust one of your shallow friends over me. Have I ever lied to you? His frustration simmered just below the surface. Have I ever given you a reason to doubt my loyalty or to be jealous? No, never, she replied, feeling a mix of guilt and frustration. She had never heard him describe her friends in such a derogatory way, but she decided to let it go for now. Honey, I know how friendly you can be. I've watched you make friends in minutes, even with other women. You might not realize it, but I've seen how they look at you when you walk away. I know some of them would jump at the chance to flirt. That's ridiculous. You're making me sound like I'm some kind of celebrity, she exclaimed. The tension was escalating, and she needed to cool things down before it spiraled further. Michael, I'm just saying you have a charming personality. People are drawn to you. I just want you to understand that some women might interpret your friendliness as flirting. They could think you're available, married or not. She held her breath, hoping her words would diffuse the situation. "So how does that justify you believing I'd go around kissing waitresses and trusting your friend over my own wife?" he retorted. Rebecca cursed inwardly, knowing she had hoped to sidestep that question. Their argument dragged on for another 20 minutes without any resolution, both of them stubbornly clinging to their positions on trust. Despite their differences, neither chose to sleep on the couch or retreat to separate rooms, but Rebecca could feel the distance between them growing. Michael was far from forgiving, and she refused to lower herself by trying to change his mind. The following Tuesday, Michael met Leonard for drinks after work. He was already sitting at the bar, taking a sip of his beer when his friend walked in, a broad grin plastered across his face. "Hey Rocky, how's Adrian?" Leonard joked, attempting to mimic a famous line. Michael glanced at him. "Isn't Rocky the one who talks like that?" "Sure is, but I can't pull off a Burgess Meredith impression, so this will have to do." He chuckled as he slid onto the stool beside Michael and ordered a beer. "Seriously though, how are things between you and Rebecca?" "We're barely speaking. I'm still fuming, and she knows it, so she's been avoiding me." "When are you going to cut her some slack?" "Most people at the party didn't even notice anything was wrong. After you left, people were asking about you both." "What did you say?" "I told them something came up and you had to leave. Nobody pressed for details. They probably figured you were just eager to get home, if you know what I mean." Leonard laughed. "Yeah, well, we haven't exactly been in the mood since the party. Speaking of which, what's going on with Charles? Is he plotting some kind of revenge?" "I doubt it. Nathaniel filled me in on what went down before he took Rebecca home. When I got inside, Charles was just picking himself off the floor. He mentioned you gave him quite the punch." "I sure did," Michael replied, a hint of pride creeping into his voice. "Well, he was talking about getting even, but I warned him to back off. I told him you're the toughest guy around and that I've seen you take down guys twice your size. I even threw in my favorite Bible quote." "You have a favorite Bible quote? I had no idea." "Absolutely. Yeah, though he walks through the valley of the shadow of death, he fears no evil, for he's the toughest and meanest in the valley." "That's you." Michael couldn't help but laugh. "That's complete nonsense, and you know it." "Of course I know it, but Charles doesn't. I think I scared him enough that he'll think twice before crossing you." "Well, I appreciate that," Michael said, sharing a knowing smile with Leonard as they both took another sip of their drinks. "You know what really bugs me?" Michael began. "The fact that Rebecca doesn't believe me when I say I didn't kiss that waitress." "Are you completely sure you didn't? Maybe just a peck on the cheek or something?" "No," he trailed off, and Leonard noticed the look on his face. It was clear he recalled something. "Aha! So you did kiss her, didn't you?" "No, she kissed me," Michael clarified, the irritation creeping back into his voice. "Damn, I see what this is all about." The next day, Rebecca was taken by surprise when Michael strolled into her office at work. He didn't waste any time and declared that he was taking her to lunch. Before she could respond, assuming it was his way of making amends, she thanked him but noted that it was a bit early and asked if he could wait about 20 minutes. Michael assured Rebecca that there was no reason to delay. He had already spoken to her boss about a minor family emergency, and she had been granted an extended lunch hour. "Trust me," he said, gently nudging her toward the car. A sense of unease crept over her. What family emergency could possibly warrant this sudden urgency? As she slid into the passenger seat, Michael held the door open for her. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to mask her apprehension. "First, call your friend," he instructed. "Find out the name of the restaurant where the incident happened." "Why do you need that?" she questioned, though he only offered a cryptic smile, assuring her he was onto something. Reluctantly, she reached for her phone and dialed Sarah. "Hey, what was the name of that place?" she asked. When she got the answer, "Deers on Homan Avenue," Michael's face lit up with a smile. "What a coincidence," he remarked, his excitement at the revelation contrasting sharply with her growing anxiety. Why on earth would he want to revisit that location? Did he plan to confront her about what had happened? The thought gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the fear that he might even flirt with the waitress right in front of her. She decided to wait and see how things unfolded. The drive felt interminable, each minute stretching as her mind raced through countless scenarios, each more distressing than the last. By the time they arrived, she felt on the verge of tears. Michael placed a supportive hand on her back, guiding her through the restaurant door, where she immediately sensed trouble looming. "Wow! Look who decided to bring his better half today." A cheerful voice greeted them. Rebecca turned to see Grace, the waitress, who looked genuinely surprised to see them together. "Hi, Grace," she managed, feeling heat rush to her cheeks. "Rebecca, how did you manage to get him here for a real lunch? He's usually in such a hurry," she joked, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Michael was having none of it. "Rebecca seems to think I'm having an affair with you," he stated, his tone playfully accusatory. Rebecca waited for the punchline, but when it didn't come, she stammered, "What? No, Grace, that's not true." Turning to Michael, she pleaded, "Come on, Michael. I made a mistake. I'm really sorry." Grace, confused but clearly enjoying the drama, replied, "I didn't even know you worked here." "But we haven't," Grace began, but Michael interrupted. "Last week, when I came in, you gave me a friendly peck on the cheek," he reminded her. "Oh gosh, Rebecca, it was nothing," Grace said, flustered. "Just a friendly greeting." Rebecca felt a wave of understanding wash over her. "No, really, it's my fault," she said to Grace. "I misunderstood everything. I'll have a serious talk with Sarah about spreading rumors." Michael smirked. "I'm curious to hear how that conversation goes." Rebecca took a deep breath and accepted his challenge. She pulled out her phone and dialed Sarah. "Hey, Sarah, you won't believe what just happened," she said, her tone shifting to one of annoyance. "You know that waitress you said was kissing Michael? Guess what? She's his cousin. How could you mislead me like that? You made it sound like he was having an affair. I don't care what you thought you saw. Keep your gossip to yourself from now on." "Yeah, you too," she snapped before hanging up, almost hurting her finger on the disconnect button. "Was it Sarah stirring the pot again?" Michael asked, shaking his head. "Definitely," Rebecca said, feeling anger replace her previous anxiety. "I'm really sorry to both of you. Michael, you were right. I should have known better. You have a few more apologies waiting for you at home tonight," Michael reminded her. "You'll need to apologize to Leonard, Patricia, and Rachel." "And what about Charles?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You can tell Charles to take a hike. No one pursues a married woman, no matter how charming she may be." Grace, who had been listening quietly, chimed in, "Who's Charles?" "Just a guy she was flirting with," Michael replied with a playful grin. "Flirting?" Grace asked, raising an eyebrow. "Don't listen to him, Grace," Rebecca said, shaking her head. "I made a mistake, and I'm still dealing with him rubbing my nose in it." "It sounds like you two had quite the weekend," Grace remarked, observing the tension dissolve into laughter. "Let's just say Rebecca learned an important lesson about trust," Michael replied, glancing at his wife with a hint of affection. Feeling more at ease, Rebecca opened the menu. "So, Grace, what do you recommend?" After lunch, Rebecca found herself on the phone for nearly an hour, offering apologies to their friends, including Rachel. That night, as they lay in bed together, the air was thick with unspoken tension. "Are you still mad?" Rebecca asked softly. "It depends," Michael replied, his voice low. "On what?" "On whether you still think I would cheat on you." "I never really thought you would cheat. I just worried you might unintentionally lead someone on," she admitted. Michael considered her words, recalling the wave of jealousy he felt watching her flirt with Charles. As much as he hated to admit it, he understood her concerns a little better now. Just as he was about to voice his forgiveness, he felt her hand glide down his body, fingers dancing over his skin. "Come on, honey, you can't stay mad at me," she cooed, her voice laced with playful seduction. He paused, deciding to keep his forgiveness unspoken for a moment longer. Her fingers wrapped around him, and he felt himself responding, desire coursing through him. Michael closed his eyes, surrendering to the sensations as her warm breath teased him. She trailed soft kisses along his length, sending jolts of pleasure radiating through him. "Oh God!" he groaned, surrendering to the overwhelming rush of feeling. Rebecca could tell she had already won his forgiveness, but she wanted to push boundaries. Swinging a leg over him, she guided him inside her, closing her eyes as she leaned forward, hands resting on his taut abs. She moved rhythmically, driving him deeper with each thrust. "Oh, babe, I don't think I can hold on much longer," he gasped. "Neither can I," she gasped, lost in the moment. Just then, she arched her back, her body stiffening as the wave of ecstasy overtook her, and that was Michael's cue. He followed her into the blissful surrender, their bodies entwined as they shared a moment of pure intimacy. A month later, while sharing lunch with Patricia, Rebecca reflected on their relationship. "You and Michael seem to be doing great. Does he still flirt with waitresses?" Patricia asked, a teasing glint in her eyes. "Not as much," Rebecca replied, smiling. "He's still friendly, which I love about him, but he seems to hold back a little more now." "Isn't that all you wanted?" "Exactly," she exclaimed. Then, curiosity got the best of Patricia. "So, have you heard from Charles lately?" "No, and honestly, I'm a bit offended. One punch, and he just disappears." "What a coward." They both burst into laughter, the tension of the past finally behind them.